I don't have as much time this morning, but when did that ever stop me? Anyway, yeah, we're going to meet Dr. Adrian here in a little while, and we have to buzz off for the day up to Clinton. But I'm going to try to finish up chapter 9 of the book of the prophet Jeremiah. Uh, if you didn't come to Full Gospel last night, you can watch the program today. It's our third Sunday night in a row that we've done a prophecy Q&A about all things prophecy, whether it's prophecy that's already come to pass or prophecy that is yet to come to pass. It doesn't matter. It's my very favorite kind of program. I love doing it because I love talking about the Bible. Anyway, we will be there again, they were always there, but I will be with them again next Sunday night for a record-breaking fourth Sunday night in a row of our presentation and then a long Q&A. I think our presentation to open the discussion took about 15 minutes, and then we spent over an hour on questions and answers. Answered many questions before we had some questions ahead of time that we answered, but at least over 30 minutes I know of Q&A from the audience directly. If you have questions early, you can go ahead and give them to me or to Pastor Akins or to Pastor James or Pastor Josh, and we will have answers for you next Sunday night if we're able to know those answers. Can't be dogmatic about a lot of this stuff because we just don't have enough information, but we do have enough information to talk about the things that are most important now, that Jesus is coming soon. The rapture could happen at any time. There is nothing that has to happen before the rapture happens. So either come be with us or watch us on live stream, and then the next day they're always archived on YouTube, and I post them on this Facebook site so you can see them. Chapter 9 of the book of the prophet Jeremiah. It is several years before the final siege of Jerusalem, and Jeremiah is speaking to the rich people, to the prophets, to the priests, to the landowners, the ruling class, to the princes, and to the court of the king. At this point, he's probably not speaking to the king because the king doesn't want to listen. Their last good king, Josiah, died 10 years at least before this sermon. So anyway, let's just back up to where we were yesterday, or actually Saturday, and we'll just bring us back into line here. In verse 23 of Jeremiah 9, thus saith the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might. Let not the rich man glory in his riches. But let him that glorieth glory in the Lord. That's what it says in 1 Corinthians. But let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord. We say that prayer all the time. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thy kingdom come. We are praying for that kingdom to come, and it will, because the king is coming. Now, beginning in verse 25, behold, the days come, saith the Lord. Jeremiah speaking the word of the Lord. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will punish all them which are circumcised with the uncircumcised. We can extrapolate on that to where when judgment comes, the righteous suffer along with the wicked, that the good suffer along with the evil. There are many examples of this. We're not talking about personal redemption. We're not talking about personal salvation. We're talking about societal preservation, so to speak, like God would save a city, that he would preserve a city. A good example is Nineveh, that God had sought to destroy. And he told Jonah to go to Nineveh and prophet. And Nineveh was the capital of the great Assyrian Empire, which was the world empire before Babylon. And God sent Jonah to prophesy to them and say that yet 30 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And God was going to destroy that city because of the great wickedness and the sin in that city. But they repented. And so it was over 100 years afterward, after they repented, that Babylon overtook the Assyrian Empire and absorbed it into the Babylonian Empire. So that city did not fall for several generations after that. And there were babies and grandbabies and great grandbabies that came and enjoyed the peace of the city because they repented. But when the judgment came, it came upon everybody. It came upon the ones that remembered the Lord, and it came upon the ones who didn't know the Lord. We have examples of that in the United States. At least three that I can think of. The Great Depression, it affected everybody, except for the very super rich. And it didn't matter whether you were a bum or whether you were a hard-working person. It didn't matter. When the bottom dropped out in 1929, and there was a time when the official figures say that there was 25% of the adult population out of work. That at that time measured only the adult male population. I believe it's really underrepresented because they were going by production numbers and factory numbers and manufacturing and things like that. What about all the poor people in the rural vastness of the United States? What about the people in the Grapes of Wrath, the Jodes? What about my people down in Texas? My grandmother said that when the Depression came to Kimball County, that they didn't know anything new had happened because they was depressed already. I mean, when you're already poor, what difference does the Depression make? But it didn't matter, the churchgoer and the heathen, they who would never darken the doors of a church, and the ones who were drinking in the speakeasies. Joe sent me, and they were drinking that illegal liquor out of Canada and Mexico because prohibition reigned at the time. The rich and the poor alike, they were all affected by the Depression. And even the rich men, they had their money. They didn't suffer indignities. They didn't have to beg. They didn't have to ride the rails. They didn't have to get thrown out in the road off of their own land, have the bank come along and take their land and just throw them out in the street. There's no wonder you had all them bank robbers back then, because the people would hide them because everybody hated the banks because the banks took their farms. Everybody had to pay, but just the poor people, they suffered the worst. But the rich people, they felt it too because there was no market for their goods. The money wasn't worth much. It was just paper. The rich people were still rich, but they weren't thriving because their customer base was gone. This actually revealed the central flaw in capitalism. Without a market, you're broke. Of course, it's better than anything else that has come along. But if people, it doesn't matter how well you make something and how economical the price is. If people don't have money to buy it, then it might as well be a spaceship. It's out of their reach. And that's what happened during the Depression. There was no money. And so the production of goods dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. So the rich people felt it, but they weren't hurt. But all the merchant class were hurt. How many stores, how many banks, how many companies, how many gas stations, garages, car dealerships, insurance offices, how many businesses failed? And these people were the original middle class that had existed since probably before the Civil War. The real American middle class did not exist until after World War II. And in the prosperity of being the only one left standing after the World War II, we were like the cock of the walk. We were king of the hill, and so we could make all the rules and spend all the money, and that is where the middle class came from. It came from union membership, and it came from winning World War II. And from 1946 until the early 70s, we had the most prosperity in the United States ever. However, wages in terms, real terms, when you adjust for inflation, I'm not making any more money now than I did in 1975. But that's another story and not for this program. The wicked and the just alike have to pay when judgment comes upon a land. It affects everybody. Like if there's no water, or if the water's all polluted, if it's all dirty, if it's been corrupted by fracking gas and fracking water or whatever, to use as an example, some of those people up in western New York and northern Pennsylvania, all around Erie, Buffalo, all up in there. Well, it affects everyone. Everybody has to drink the same water or buy it. Nobody is left untouched. If there is a famine, if there's no bread to buy, the rich and poor alike pay. Because if you have $1 million in the bank and there's no bread in the grocery store, you would go hungry too. Now, it has not ever been that severe here, but the Bible tells us that one day it will be. Read Matthew 24. Read the first 11 chapters of Revelation. One day it will be that bad. Remember that song we used to sing in the 70s? Life was filled with guns and wars, and everyone got trampled on the floor. I wish we'd all been ready. Children died, the days were cold. A loaf of bread could buy a bag of gold. I wish we'd all been ready. That's what happens. Picture in your mind in Weimar, Germany, people bringing wheelbarrows full of worthless Deutschmarks to the grocery store to buy a piece of bread. They take one of those bills and they say that they would cut out a piece of bread just as big as that bill and give it to them out of pity more than anything else because the money was worthless. When things like that happen, they happen to everybody, the wicked and the just alike, when God judges a nation. Now, God did this, a famine one time in Israel, the northern kingdom, and the whole land starved. The whole land was faint with the want of water. It got to a point where the king would take the horses that were left and go out and search for water to see if they could, and provender, if they could find enough to keep a few of the horses and cattle alive. At the same time, God fed Elijah by a brook that was ever dry, and he gave him water to drink out of this brook. And the ravens brought him food to eat every night. I said, well, do you really believe that, Brother Harris? Yeah, I do. Because I've never had a bird bring me a piece of bread, but I've had unasked for, unsuspected money come in the mail right about the time I needed to buy a tank of gas. I don't see any difference in it. It's still the hand of God. But God will preserve his own. I'm sure that you who are old enough have your own depression stories from your parents and grandparents. Another time when we were judged, the whole nation was in the Great Civil War. It was a judgment on slavery. I'm sorry what some of my Reconstructionist friends might say. Slavery was a great evil upon this land, possibly because it made our Declaration of Independence a lie, made our Constitution a lie, because in reality all men were not created equal, because we held 4+ million of them in chattel slavery, mostly in the South. And we fought a war about that, and everybody suffered in that war. Godly people suffered in that war. The whole country suffered in that war. Now, the Yankees won, the Union won, and the South was destroyed to where it didn't recover for another 100 years. But the scars of that war are still here today. Nobody is unaffected. Southerns want to find something to be proud of. Black people north and south get offended when they see a Confederate flag. I don't really blame them. See, the point is that when God judges a nation, everybody suffers, the wicked and the poor, or as God puts it through Jeremiah in verse 25, the wicked and the just, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will punish all them which are circumcised with the uncircumcised. Now, he's talking specifically about punishing Jews along with the heathen nations around them because of the covenant of circumcision. But in our era now that we're in the Christian age, good morning, Charlie. We're in the Christian era, the church age. God expects our hearts to be uncircumcised, our hearts to be circumcised, that we open our hearts, that we spread our hearts open. And so the Christian, the one who is bought with the blood of Jesus Christ, he has the old heart. The old heart becomes circumcised to the new covenant, to the new life in Jesus Christ, and is able to accept those things. Those are spiritual terms, but here he's talking about the actual in ancient Judah, that the circumcised and the uncircumcised would be judged. When God judges the land, he's not going to make any distinction between the Jew and the Philistine, or the Jew and the Moabite. He's not going to do it, because he's going to judge the land, and if you're in the land, you're going to have trouble. Although you remember from our past lessons in the last few weeks that God keeps extending his hand and telling people that if any individual person will come to me, I will help you. I will protect you. I'll take responsibility for you. That offer is still in effect at this time for Judah to individual people, but he's still going to destroy the land. The other time that I believe that we were judged, I believe we were judged in the Civil War, slavery, and for the Depression. Those three. Now, in verse 26, it says, Egypt and Judah and Edom and the children of Ammon and Moab, all that are in the uttermost corners that dwell in the wilderness, for all these nations are uncircumcised, and all the house of Israel are uncircumcised in heart. What he's saying here is the religious people, God's people, the Jews, whether they're religious or not, they have the covenant of circumcision in their flesh. Now, he says he's going to judge them just like they were uncircumcised, just like they were a Philistine or a Hittite or an Ammonite or an Amalekite. But it's interesting here, he says that Egypt and Judah and Edom and the children of Ammon and Moab, I'm going to count all of them uncircumcised. Now, he explains about Israel that they're uncircumcised in the heart. But I think we could draw the conclusion that Edom started out circumcised because Edom is Esau. Esau was Isaac's son, and Isaac would have circumcised his sons when they were born, just like his father did. Abraham did to him. He would have done this. But apparently they didn't continue it on. Now, there's no reason to think that Ammon and Moab were circumcised, even though they're descendants of Lot. Moab and Bon-Ami were the two sons that drunken Lot had with his daughters, conceived with his daughters when they made him get drunk. And then they lay with their father and conceived. You can't say that Lot was circumcised. There's no way. And let me tell you why. Because he and Abraham part company in chapter 13 of Genesis, and Lot pitches his tent toward Sodom, and Abraham goes the other way. Well, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah happens in chapter 19, but the covenant of circumcision happens in chapter 17. So God gives this covenant to Abraham and his seed and everybody that's in his house and everybody that was bought with his money. So it wasn't Lot in Abraham's house. Yeah, but he had already left Abraham's house to go out on his own before God gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision. So you can't not only count Bonami and Moab as circumcised, you cannot count Lot as circumcised. Even though Peter says that he was a quote saved man, that he belonged to God and God knew that he belonged to him, and that was probably from his commitment to Abraham early on, and Abraham was that influence on him. Lot had seen what God had done for Abraham. He might have, even when they split up, he might have even wanted God to do the same thing for him. God, make me as rich as Abraham. And it looks like he did, even though he lost it all in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The same thing is happening in the United States now, because the godly and the ungodly alike are suffering. The thief doesn't care whether you belong to Jesus or not. The murderer doesn't care whether you belong to Jesus or not. The people who are rioting in the streets and burning cities, they don't care whether you belong to Jesus or not. All of these riots and protests against Jerusalem because Satan hates the Jews, so all of Satan's people hate the Jews and want to kill all of them. From the river, from the sea to the river, from the river to the sea. Listen to them. In their mind, in their religion, they're not going to be satisfied until every Jew is dead. But they cannot succeed because the Jews belong to God. Nothing has changed in that regard. Israel is still God's people. And though they're lost, though they don't know who their Messiah is, though they don't worship according to righteousness, they're God's people. And God is going to save a remnant of them. We'll have many Jews, because the kingdom is for the Jews. It is the kingdom of Israel. We have a Jewish king who's going to come back and sit on a Jewish throne of his Jewish father, David. We're going to have a Jewish king that has come back and rule over his Jewish people from his father, Abraham. And he's going to rule with a rod of iron, and the throne will be in Jerusalem, and the law will go forth from Mount Zion. So in the United States today, the wicked and the just alike are being judged, because God is judging the land. He is judging the nation. He is judging this country. The offer still holds. Come unto me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's what he says. Behold, the days come, and they're coming. And he is going to make a judgment. Come to Jesus today. God love you.